So to start us off, we have Vibha, who's a student at MIT. She works with Mohammed and Hari, I believe, and she's going to talk about how routing networks in can be built in cryptocurrencies and improve their performance. Take it away.
Thank you, Panda. I'm Vibha, and I'm here to talk about how we can use ideas from networking to improve transaction throughput for today's blockchains. And this is joint work with my collaborators at MIT, CMU, and UIUC. To start off, what is a blockchain? In essence, it is a shared distributed ledger that tracks all of the transactions associated with a cryptocurrency's history. So in particular, if two users, Alice and Bob, want to transact with each other, and say Alice wants to send 4 coins to Bob, she creates a transaction saying that she's sending 4 coins to Bob, signs it, and then sends it over the network to a group of miners. And the miner's role is to verify this transaction, ensure that Alice hasn't spent these funds already, and then include the transaction along with a set of other transactions in the next block. And this process of creating or finding the next block is time-consuming, so that there is enough time for everyone to hear about the transaction and come to consensus about it, no matter what the consensus mechanism is. In Bitcoin, for instance, this consensus process can take up to 10 minutes to generate the next block. And every single transaction that ever goes into a block needs to go through this process and wait for this time-consuming consensus mechanism. So this clearly doesn't scale as is. In particular, these transactions suffer from very high latencies. Bitcoin transactions can take 10 minutes to enter a block and up to an hour to get confirmed. In contrast, if we wanted to support transactions similar to today's credit card transaction rates, thousands of transactions per second, we'd need 350 additional gigabytes of storage just to store the block data. And this would be on a per-day basis. And since blocks are a limited resource, they can be quite expensive. And these transactions in Bitcoin, for instance, have a fee typically around $1, with the higher end going all the way up to $34. A popular solution to this problem is the idea of payment channels, where the essence is to use the blockchain as an arbiter only as and when necessary. So going back to our previous case of Alice and Bob wanting to transact with each other, if they're aware that they're going to be transacting with each other over a period of time, they can just open a common fund, similar to a gift card, where they put in 7 coins in total. And from the perspective of the blockchain, Alice and Bob jointly funded this gift card with 7 coins. And Alice and Bob privately maintain these balance messages, reflecting the fact that Alice owns 4 of these coins and Bob owns 3 of them. And now if Alice wants to send something over to Bob, say 1 coin, she just creates a new balance message reflecting the fact that Bob owns 4 of these coins and signs it. And this can be done in a completely secure manner, even if Alice and Bob don't trust each other. And similarly, now if Bob wants to send 2 coins over to Alice, he just gives Alice a new balance message reflecting the fact that Alice owns 5 of these coins. And this process can essentially continue as long as Alice and Bob want to transact with each other, until a point when they've decided they're done transacting and they want to close out this gift card or this channel, at which point they just make a second blockchain transaction, reflecting the fact that Alice took out 5 of the coins out of the 7 coins that they jointly funded. Note that the key point here is only the initial funding transaction and the final closing transaction hit the main blockchain, and everything in between where Alice and Bob exchange funds are saved from the slow confirmation times and the high transaction fees of the blockchain. This works for 2 parties, Alice and Bob, wanting to transact with each other. But it's clearly not feasible for me to create a payment channel with every entity that I would ever want to transact with. And here's where the idea of a payment channel network comes in. In essence, now if Alice wants to send 3 coins to Bob, she doesn't have a direct payment channel with him, but she can find an intermediary, Charlie in this case, to whom she can send the 3 coins on her payment channel with Charlie, and then Charlie can send 3 coins over to Bob on his payment channel. So if she did so, the balances between Alice and Charlie would be updated in the following manner, and similarly between Charlie and Bob. Note that, again, this can be done in a completely secure manner with no trust between Alice, Charlie, or Bob, ensuring that Charlie cannot take the funds from Alice and not give it to Bob. But this doesn't answer the question of which intermediary to use or which path of payment channels to use. So consider a scenario where Alice wants to send 3 more coins to Bob. She can use the same path as before, or there exists a second path through Eve, Mary, and Bob, but that path is not usable if Alice wants to send 3 coins to Bob, because Alice can send 3 coins to Charlie, but Charlie can only send up to 1 coin to Eve on that path. So let's assume Alice uses this path to send the 3 coins. And this is similar to what today's payment channel networks do, which is find the shortest path with sufficient amount of funds. And Alice sends the funds over, changing the balances between them in this manner. Note that at the end of this process, all of the funds between Alice and Charlie end up on Charlie's side, and similarly, all of the funds between Charlie and Bob end up on Bob's side. In particular, if Charlie wants to send 3 coins to Bob, there's no way for him to do so, because on his direct channel with Bob, he cannot send any more funds. And on the channel with Eve, and on the path through Eve, Mary, and Bob, he can only send up to 1 coin to Eve. And this is despite the fact that Charlie has 9 coins on the channel with Alice, but these are solely reserved for transacting with Alice and therefore can't be used to transact with Bob or Eve or anyone else. And if he wanted to do so, he would have to go back to the blockchain, reinitialize these gift cards with a different assignment of funds. So this gets at the heart of the problem with payment channel networks. In reality, many senders and receivers on this network might be sending or transacting at very different rates along payment channels with extremely different capacities. And if funds run out on any of these payment channels, they're basically unusable, and this hurts the system throughput. And one can get around this by just initializing these payment channels with a lot of funds, but these funds are locked in and cannot be used elsewhere, and therefore we don't want to do this. So our goal is to design routing for payment channel networks such that we can support high transaction throughput, even with a small amount of capital. And our proposed idea, the Spider network, achieves high throughput through 2 key ideas. The first being the idea of packetizing transactions or splitting them into smaller units that are then transmitted independently and over time. And this gives us benefits similar to packet-switched architecture in communication networks, which is statistical multiplexing and a wider range of paths, in contrast to current approaches that are more circuit-switched in nature. The second idea is that of balance-aware routing, where we route based on real-time balance information in order to maintain the longevity of the payment channel network as a whole. Let's delve a little deeper into these 2 aspects. First, to see what the benefits of a packet-switched payment channel network are, let's consider the following scenario where Alice wants to send 3 coins to Bob on this slightly different payment channel network. Today's approaches are circuit-switched in that they expect all of the funds to be available for a given transaction on a single path at the time of sending. So in this case, neither of the 2 paths work, because even if Alice is able to send 3 coins to Charlie, Charlie can only send 2 coins to Bob on the direct path and only up to 1 coin through Eve, Mary, and Bob. But if instead Alice was able to break up her 3 coins into 2 smaller transactions, one of size 1 and another of size 2, she can now use the first path to send 2 coins, and then she can use the second one to send the remaining 1 coin. In essence, Alice is able to complete a payment that she was previously unable to make any progress on. The second benefit associated with a packet-switched payment channel network comes in the form of supporting large payments. Let's consider the following scenario where there are a set of users on the left of Alice and a set of users on the right of Bob who want to transact with each other, but the only paths between them go through Alice and Bob, creating the scenario where Alice needs to send 30 coins to Bob and Bob needs to send 30 coins to Alice. There's no way to even start making progress in this scenario because none of the payment channels between Alice and Bob can support anywhere close to 30 coins. But if we were able to break the transaction up into smaller chunks, say 1 coin, if we were able to send 1 coin at a time, Alice can send 1 coin to Bob, and the moment Bob receives this, it frees up some funds in the opposite direction, allowing Bob to send 1 coin back to Alice. And this process can effectively continue, not changing any payment channel balances in between, until Alice and Bob, or rather the users to the left of Alice and the users to the right of Bob have finished transacting the 30 coins that they intended to transact. So once again, packet switching is able to help us make progress in a scenario where no progress was foreseeable earlier. So far, I've discussed what the benefits of splitting a transaction are, but I haven't really discussed how we find paths or how we decide how to split these transactions and how much to send on each of these paths. To better understand this problem, let's consider a simpler model of the fluid model where we can just look at the transactions as a continuous stream. And under this model, we have what is called a payment graph that just captures the demand. And the way you want to read this is it essentially captures the rate at which every sender wants to send payments to a receiver per unit time. So in this case, Bob wants to send 1 coin per unit time to Alice. Alice wants to send 2 coins per unit time to Charlie, and so on. Now the question is, how much of this demand can be satisfied given a certain topology that represents the payment channels that different users share with each other? And each of these payment channels comes with a certain capacity. Note that this can be fairly different from the payment graph, which captures who wants to pay whom. And now the question is, what rate should we be sending per edge and in what direction in order to satisfy the demand described by the payment graph? So far, this is similar to typical traffic engineering problems or multi-commodity flow problems. But a key differentiating factor in the context of this problem is that the rate on the forward edge needs to be equal to the rate on the backward edge. And this is because we need to maintain balance on every payment channel. Otherwise, all of the funds will end up on one party's side, after which no further transactions can take place on that particular payment channel. To see how this impacts our problem, we can break up our payment graph into what we call the circulation that represents the component of the payment graph that can be routed in this balance maintaining form. So in other words, we want every sender to be sending at the same rate that they're receiving. So if we peel off cycles where this is true from the payment graph until we have no further cycles, we have effectively computed that part of the demand or the volume of transactions that can be routed in this balance maintaining form. This leaves a DAG portion, which is all the remaining edges of the payment graph. And these payments cannot be completed even if we had infinite capacity on the payment channels. So we do need to go through the main blockchain to complete these payments, or someone needs to refund their payment channel periodically. A detailed proof on why the circulation is the only amount that we can route can be found in an extended version of this paper. So now that we know we can route the circulation, how do we actually translate this into rates on each of the edges? This can be formulated as an LP where we're trying to maximize the transaction throughput, or in other words, the sum of all the rates, subject to constraints corresponding to the capacity constraints as well as the balance constraint that's particular to this problem. And solving this centrally gives us an optimal assignment of the rates on every single edge to satisfy the circulation portion of the demand. But it turns out this can be solved in a decentralized manner through typical primal dual decomposition algorithms, where every payment channel maintains a certain price in every direction that's reflective of the current imbalance or congestion. And this is quite natural given that the intermediaries already charge a certain fee to route payments through them. And now as this imbalance changes, the price also changes accordingly. So the more funds a given entity has, the price to send in that direction decreases. And as funds decrease in a particular direction, the price increases, disincentivizing payments in that direction. And now the senders merely compute the cheapest paths given these prices, and these change as the prices themselves change. More details on the update equation for computing these prices and how the centers compute the paths can also be found in the extended version. I'm going to quickly go over some of the evaluation details. We built a simulator that models transaction processing, and we scheduled all of the remaining transaction units according to SRPT. And the transactions were modeled off real-time currency exchange data, both in terms of the transaction sizes as well as the sender-receiver pairs. We used two different kinds of topology, one from ISP graphs as well as another version from the currency exchange data itself. I'm going to focus on the ISP graphs for the purpose of this talk because they're a little simpler to understand. We evaluated the schemes along two particular metrics. One reflects the volume of payments completed as a fraction of the total volume of payments that was attempted on the payment channel network. And the y-axis reports the success as a percentage. The left two bars describe silent whispers, speedy murmurs and silent whispers, which are two existing approaches to routing in payment channel networks that are circuit switched. We implemented a naive shortest paths algorithm that just has the idea of packet switching added on to it, and that's already able to beat the current approaches by quite a margin. And when we implemented our LP as a centralized version, which is balance aware, we're able to outperform all of the existing approaches, as well as achieve the optimal throughput corresponding to the circulation portion of the demand. But one might also care about just the number of payments completed and not just the volume of payments. And in this regard, it turns out our centralized LP does not do as well because it was not optimizing for the number of payments. So we implemented a simple water filling heuristic, which is similar to multipath load balancing algorithms, that is able to overcome this difficulty and also outperform all of the existing approaches on the number of payments completed too. In summary, payment channels promise to improve cryptocurrency scalability, but suffer from imbalance problems. And we propose packetizing transactions and using balance-aware routing to improve transaction throughput. We leave to future work the exact implementation of the decentralized algorithm, as well as investigation of end-host rate control mechanisms, as well as scheduling algorithms in network. We also haven't addressed economic incentives for routers that might choose to deviate from the prices that the primal dual algorithm assigns to it. Thank you, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
From Carnegie Mellon. So there seem to be a bunch of assumptions that the system is making. A, you need to have a global view of the transactions, if I am correct, or at least the general sense of how the transactions are flowing. B, that there's sort of a balance. Alice sends as many coins to Bob as Bob sends to Alice, or at least on average. And C, that you have these trusted third parties who you're willing to, who you hope are not going to take money out, or essentially these are like banks. So I feel like, aren't these sort of going against the spirit of like the decentralization of Bitcoin in some sense, like the fact that, okay, you don't want to have banks, you don't want to trust anyone, sort of a spirit. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so one at a time. To the last question on trusting, all of this can be done in a completely trustless manner. So the individual payment channel, Alice sending to Bob, Bob sending to Alice, Alice and Bob don't need to trust each other. They just exchange signatures periodically. I mean, every time someone makes a payment, they exchange a signature that can be sent on the main, that can be published on the main blockchain to establish the right sequence of events in case someone attempts to cheat. And the same thing can be extended via a concept called a hash time lock contract, even when you're sending payments through multiple parties. So this is completely trustless. The benefit is, so the trust is used only in case someone violates the honest party assumption, but there is a way to establish what actually happened if there is a violation. So there is no notion of trust in this system either.
Balancing the flows.
Yeah. To the assumption about balancing, so as it stands right now, if there's a scenario where Alice is, so I guess there is this notion of a circulation or the maximum amount of transactions that you can send in a balanced manner for a given demand. So if Alice wants to send payments to Bob, it is on her to at least fund her last hop connection if she wants to, last hop payment channel if she wants to send funds. But we expect that the rest of the network will evolve into a notion of routers that are continuously balancing payments across multiple paths, with the end users just funding their last channel. So in effect, the payments will likely get balanced through the middle of the network with the routers maintaining balance. And I think that's where the choice of paths helps maintain that balance. But balance is fundamental in that if you run out of balance, you can't make any further payments. I don't think that's as much an assumption as it is given in the system.
Is centralization important, or am I misunderstanding?
So the evaluation, we evaluated a centralized version of the LP where we compute the rates and then we tell the nodes to be sending at that particular, on each path at proportional to those rates. But we do have this decentralized algorithm where every individual entity in this payment channel can make their own independent decisions, just make these price updates and convey the information to the senders, and then the senders can make their independent decisions too. But that's left to future work.
Thanks.
I enjoyed your talk. I have a quick comment about the last part. I was thinking about it as you were giving the talk about the incentives. So we tried this notion of using sort of the dual with prices to do distributed routing in a different context. And one problem with that is that it is not strategy proof. This kind of, in the sense that while individual entities, you may be able to come up with some incentives, there is potential for collusion. And it is hard to protect against multiple parties colluding and poisoning your route computation algorithm. So I was wondering, have you given thought? I mean, how broad of a threat model are you assuming to your computation of these, the distributed things?
We haven't investigated too much into the economic incentives themselves, but in this case, at least if someone is reporting a wrong price or claiming to charge a lower price to incentivize someone to send through them, there is a way to find out because the sender needs to send that additional amount corresponding to the routing fee also on the payment when they're sending it through.
Yep.
So if they try to take more than that, the payment was just eventually going to fail. So the sender will be aware of that. But collusion, I don't think we've spent too much time thinking about it. But that's something we're definitely hoping to explore.
Okay, thanks.
You can say no to me too. Okay, thank you. Okay, I have a question. So one of the original motivations for like packet sort of networks is actually that they're like fault tolerant, right? You actually wanted fault tolerance, which is why I moved from circuit switch to packet switch networks. But it seems like in this case, packet switched transactions may cause fault problems. It's like, okay, imagine you sent a packet and this one person in the middle went away. One of the payment intermediaries went away during the transaction. So I'm like, how does this system deal with like faults when some of these people are flaky nodes?
So each of these transactions has a certain expiry date associated with it too. The way the process of sending payments through multiple parties is, the way it's made secure includes a time of expiry associated with the transaction. So you will find out if the receiver does not acknowledge the receipt of your payment, then you're aware that it has not gone through, and then you will have to send it through a different path. But there is more avenue for
take the money and run away in the middle.
There's no way for any entity to take the money away and run away. This is completely secure with regards to that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.